This is me, surname trying the autism spectrum quotient. I consider myself autistic and not diagnosed. I could attempt to be diagnosed. I don't really see the benefit in it, except when I've just tried applying for benefits and got told that because I'm not diagnosed, I don't get the benefits. That would be a benefit to it. I've done this before and to my memory got blindingly high results. I didn't save what that was, but many years back. This isn't science in itself, it's a bit of a guide, and maybe it's outdated information. It's from an era when autism was considered masculine. I don't know, I'm making this video less to interrogate who I am, but what's in the test. Now, yeah, I consider myself autistic and it's not diagnosed. I think I potentially had some assessments as a kid. I went to a child psychologist who's rubbish. He was only 7. But here's how it works. A friend who went to an autism specialist school describes me as very obviously autistic. And yeah, when you get your diagnosis, you get one diagnosis to pass along, right? I don't know if that means that I can pass one along as well. I also know people who work in autism diagnostics and who agree with that, but I recognize that for me it doesn't manifest much as a disorder, but kind of an order. I dislike language that suggests like you have autism, like it's a crippling setback that compares you to normal people who don't. In my experience, the most normal, like understandable people are those who are autistic. And yeah, I speak from the position of privilege of mainly getting along with autistic people and it kind of being an assumption that anyone I can communicate with probably is. I recognize that this quite vaguely defined condition also describes plenty of people for whom it really impairs their lifestyle, or at least how little the world accommodates them really impairs their lifestyle. And in having this identity for myself, I check my privilege. Whilst I'm dissing the language around it, I can also point out that obviously the word Asperger's is shit, but then even the word autistic, the aut in that is self. Let's get a etymology of autistic. Initially used to describe someone who was withdrawn into his own world. Oh shit, I've used an AI overview. I'm very self-involved, so I can't counter that. But yeah, even that etymology is somewhat problematic. I've zoomed in to the extent that this text is legible, but at the right, we've got definitely agree, slightly disagree, and definitely disagree, which actually definitely and slightly aren't contrasting elements. You can definitely slightly disagree with something. It should be fully or slightly. Because I've zoomed in to the extent that you can't see those, I will verbalize my responses. I prefer to do things with others rather than on my own. Difficult one to start with for me, as I think I would have clicked the loner thing in the past, but I really find in like the rapid onset of adulthood that I strongly struggle to concentrate by myself. Oh, that's considered ADHD, which is arguably a different thing to autism, but maybe not, because current science doesn't really have a firm grasp on these things. I kind of wish there was a neutral answer for these. This doesn't strongly resonate with me either way. I'll let my recent, I say recent, it's probably been like 15 years now, recent need for company put me on to slightly agree. I prefer to do things the same way over and over again. Well, you've heard my music. Now, I see what they're grasping at with like this autistic trait of patterns, and that's never really been a definitive thing for me. I kind of ostensibly favor variety, but I also don't like doing things. I do get quite obsessive, like completionist habits. ADHD. I'm clicking slight disagree. I know all this slight data doesn't help. They want definite data. I shouldn't put this so close to the top. If I try to imagine something, I find it very easy to create a picture in my mind. So that's false. Can't do that. And the internet has more recently learned that there's a name for that, aphantasia. I have aphantasia, or I don't have fantasia. I can only slightly access visual imagination, very slightly. I do have dreams, and in very rare occasions of kind of whilst falling asleep, I can access a bit of visual illusion. Other than that, it's not there. And what that might impair for my kind of visual and spatial awareness, it's probably worth it for, not having trauma flashbacks. I frequently get so strongly absorbed in one thing that I lose sight of other things. I think that's basically true. I think the way my focus works has that when I can access focus. Again, maybe we'd call that ADHD now, and maybe we need a more faceted understanding of both that kind of doesn't pathologize so much. And yeah, I am making an argument akin to everyone being on a spectrum, just to the extent of, like, the Kinsey scale, not that it's a single dimension. I often notice small sounds when others do not. That can get a definitely agree, because I noticed the hum. Go look at the hum, because I'm not explaining it to you. But yeah, like electric whirring, a kind of idling device or something. I get tinnitus. I've been to ear, nose, throat hospital about it and related stuff. Usually tinnitus is associated with hearing damage. The response for me years ago was that my hearing is not damaged, it's actually remarkably excellent, but also with tinnitus. It sounds like a brag, it's just what's true, or was at the time. I usually notice car number plates are similar strings of information. Yeah, I do, like, you can kind of play countdown with them. The game with the number plates is what word has those letters in that order, and I think my orientation toward word games, etc., is described here. And puns. Puns are autistic. Definitely agree. Other people frequently tell me what I've said is impolite, even though I think it is polite. Yeah. They've kind of given up telling me, but I get interpreted as rude. And I'm really thoroughly trying not to be. When I'm reading a story, I can easily imagine what the characters might look like. So we're back to the aphantasia, which I didn't realize was such a consideration in autism when this test was defined. And I can't tell from this test whether it scores toward or away from. I should get an answer on that and add it in post. So that's a definitely disagree. Now, I might have said this in the aphantasia video. I used to read fiction a whole lot more. I barely bother at all now. And when I do, it's more likely to be like a graphic novel. And I think I accessed Fantasia a bit. I don't anymore, and it could be medication, it could be depression, it could be living too long, whatever. I'm fascinated by dates. Well, time's just a human construct. I really dislike astrology. I got my star sign removed. I kind of recognize what they're getting at here, and it resonates quite closely with something that describes me, and yet this itself doesn't describe me. I'd click a neutral option if it were there. I think I do get hung up on the Gregorian calendar year a bit. We are the victims of time. You can see when I've called things albums, it's often been wrapping up a year's work, and each new year I kind of face the horror of still being alive in that Gregorian year. So that can have a slightly agree, and I think it's going to get to something later on that more directly describes me. In a social group, I can easily keep track of several different people's conversations. Is that how social groups work? There's multiple conversations going on. I kind of don't like social groups because of how trite the conversation becomes. I don't fully understand, but I'm clicking strongly disagree. I find social situations easy. Strongly disagree. I do like one-on-one social, and I like combinations of people I like too. I've got 4 gamepads for all these different consoles and never invite multiple people around. I tend to notice details that others do not. I think it's true, but I think I can also have detailed blind spots that kind of correlate with aphantasia. I notice like musical detail and timbre. I'm good at only connect. Maybe I'll prove that. I would rather go to a library than a party. Okay, I work at a library, and then whenever I'm in a different city, I do go snoop on how their library works and, how fucked up their council funding is. I largely don't like the idea of a party. I think the extent to which I'm library oriented is a bit of a cheat, but it can still get fully true. I find making up stories easy. No, not really. I mean, I've made up comedic stories a bit, but it's usually to comment satirically on the very structure of storytelling. I'm clicking a full disagree. I'm just not very fiction oriented. Although, really, I've written so many songs, and arguably that's the same muscle. It's not a muscle, it's fiction that it's a muscle. As authorship, it's still authorship, and quite often fiction is inspired by one's real experiences, and yeah, my songs often are, but they're not exactly documentaries. I think at its best, that's what fiction can be, an abstracted exploration of something real. Although there's an argument to make that an exploration of something that isn't real, something fantastical, is worth it as well. I find myself drawn more strongly to people than to things. What's the thing? If other animals was an option, I'd pick that. Again, this is an element that may have changed since the last time I took this quotient. Getting into the decay of late adulthood, I just yearn for connection. And yeah, I'm drawn to people. I tend to have very strong interests which I get upset about if I can't pursue. So special interests have become a famous part of autism. Can't come up with much for this one, so I'm just clicking slightly agree and moving on to I enjoy social chit-chat. Fuck no. I mean, I enjoy witty or informative chit-chat, learning stuff and clever deconstruction, yes please. But the bits that are reciting scripts that are nearly impossible to memorize, but maybe it's because it's quite often lying, that's a very autistic way to answer that. When I talk, it isn't always easy for others to get a word in edgewise. I know my videos don't show any evidence of me letting others get a word in, but that's how a YouTube channel where the name of the channel is my name works. So what it's getting at here is the kind of infusing involved in special interests. And I may have agreed more in the past, but I think I'm clicking a slight disagree. Over years, I've noticed my impatience and selfishness in communication, and I'm trying to work against it. Until I'm sure I've managed to work against it, that can have a slight agree. I am fascinated by numbers. See, I was academically, mathematically oriented. That doesn't really define me now. I think I have an ability to retain numbers, etc. That's not the same as a fascination, so I'm clicking a slight disagree. When I'm reading a story, I find it difficult to work out the character's intentions. Yeah, I've not read stories for ages, but basically I can't watch films without going and reading on Wikipedia what actually happened, because if it wasn't right there in the text, I can miss so much anyway. That's the detail I don't necessarily notice. Do people have intentions? I'm clicking fully disagree. I don't particularly enjoy reading fiction, fully agree. Find it hard to make new friends. I think that's partly a disability thing because I am fascinating, but I'm barely mobile. I do consider that a strong struggle, making friends. So fully agree. But I think I'm approachable, and those who know what they're getting into with endeavoring to communicate with me can find it rewarding. I notice patterns in things all the time. I'm clicking strongly agree. I think that's what I'm saying about only connect. I would rather go to the theatre than to a museum. That's a full disagree. I'm not really oriented toward theatrical arts, whereas museums, there's so much you could learn from. It does not upset me if my daily routine is disturbed. Again, chronic illness kind of trumps this, but I'm saying fully disagree. That would upset me. I don't really express upset lashing out, but I can be saddened, yeah. I kind of wish my life was disturbed more by anything that appreciates me. I frequently find that I don't know how to keep a conversation going. Well, you don't need to. I'll click one of the agrees. So clearly, like, conversational competence is one of the things they're assessing here, and self-described lower competence correlates with what they're calling autism. I've been reprimanded in online conversations for stopping replying, and I'm like, yeah, because you said the information and I read it. When continuing the conversation would be that trite, I don't bother. There's a thing at least British people do, which is these two-syllable, like, response questions. If you state a fact, they'll respond, is it? Did she? Really? And like, you cannot compel me to say yes when I just said a thing that's true. The veracity's already there. I've only got a certain number of syllables left in my life. Okay, it's just past halfway, and I've realized that I've not really unpicked what it's actually testing for here, so I better do that. Note that you could get a more direct declaration by reading the original Baron Cohen work it's based upon, but really it's an outdated understanding, and now there's so many potentially even conflicting things that we understand as autistic. Research is kind of finally getting over the alleged distinction between autism and ADHD, once thought to be mutually exclusive somehow. We definitely need to think of this in a less male-oriented way, but maybe we need to think of it in a way that doesn't make autism the exceptional condition and understands the diversity of ways that people function, and, you know, eventually we might finally get to the bottom of the existence of people who are not autistic. What's up with them? So in this list of 50 statements to agree or disagree with, there's things about different characteristics. The first one I see is asociality. Not to be confused with antisociality, but yeah, asociality. There's detail orientation, but at the time in a way that plays more toward me, aphantasiac. Detail orientation bleeds into pattern spotting, which bleeds into pattern orientation, which I think doesn't describe me as much as these other characteristics, but that's quite close to kind of completionist vibes. Allow me to link the aphantasia thing to the bits that say about not really being into fiction, because I think in this regard they're referring to the skill of imagination. And then next to asociality is the struggling with social cues. Social cues are ridiculous. We have language for a reason. Why are you showing me when you could be telling me? I think together these facets describe a lot of the autistic experience. Maybe it's tailored more directly toward me, and it would be worth updating with more diverse input. I think it could also be argued that a lot of this describes quite neurotypical life as well, and I don't think that's a problem. I think if most people answer yes to most of this stuff, then maybe most people are autistic. So let's design the world better to suit most people. If there's an argument that we're describing very normal traits as if they're exceptional, then sure, whatever, it's only definitions. Let's understand stuff and each other more. The definitions are kind of just collateral along the way. The actual considerations are the real content here. I find it easy to read between the lines when someone is talking to me, so the obvious thing for me to do here, bleep flop sweat, that's not an autistic trait, would be for me to dismantle the quote, read between the lines. Obviously, that's where my instinct goes. What it means is subtext. The subtext of that phrase is a reference to subtext, and I do not get subtext. I fully do not get it. I usually concentrate more on the whole picture rather than on the small details. Again, they've referred to a picture, so I'm thinking of pictures. but I'm not picturing it. I kind of wish the neutral option was there because I want to opt out because I don't see what they're getting at. But I think I'm small detail oriented, so that's having a slight disagree. I am not very good at remembering phone numbers. I think I am quite good at that. Full disagree. At least double negatives. I don't usually notice small changes in a situation or a person's appearance. Situations and appearances are quite different things. I think I notice a bit, but I think I'm not good at retaining, like, what someone was wearing. Visual awareness. So if I think of situation, yeah, this feels neutral to me and I'm clicking slightly agree that I don't usually notice. I think my detail-orientedness has complementary blind spots that I can slightly describe by clicking slightly agree. I know how to tell if someone listening to me is getting bored. What do you think, viewer who's like 20 minutes into this video? It's kind of just not my problem. They could choose to stop listening to me. I mainly just took into the internet like this, and it's not about someone listening, but getting it said. Again, I would like to opt out of this question. I think I've adjusted toward a situation where the people I communicate with don't much get bored of me. I hope so anyway. Look, I'm clicking slight agree and moving on. I find it easy to do more than one thing at once. Kind of a full disagree. My attention can flit. ADHD. Am I going to find an ADHD quotient next? Do I keep setting up what the next fucking test video will be? When I talk on the phone, I'm not sure when it's my turn to speak. Who talks on the phone? I used to be really incompetent and scared of phone calls, and I've kind of eventually got used to it and become reasonably assertive, but I can still slightly agree with that as a turn-based game, I enjoy doing things spontaneously. Yeah, in my particular experience, there's a kind of irony to that, in that I don't really feel spontaneous in needs, but my well-being or lack thereof kinda also needs it. And it becomes this, can I call it plantaneous? Okay, Urban Dictionary already has 2 entries for this that don't describe what I'm describing, and it's probably a pretty useful definition too, but also the 0 thumbs up on these. I'm using the word plantaneous to refer to my needs, which involve like an ironic lot of planning, but the get out clause, which I don't much actually take. I'm quite reliable and loyal. I just understand future tense intentions to be like, if you said you're going to do the thing, then you're going to do the thing. So there needs to be that different level of understanding for when you're almost definitely gonna do it. My approach to spontaneity, my version of spontaneity takes fucking days of G'ing up for it, and within chronic illness, that's a little spontaneous victory. I'll click slight disagree to just boil that down. I am often the last to understand the point of a joke. It's a sexual reference, maybe, but puns, I'm probably there before the joke is made. I kind of recognize what it's getting at in myself, but I'm strongly joke-oriented, but also recognize that I can miss jokes sometimes, or at least there's that kind of neo-fascist, the word fascist has turned up, means of saying, it's just a joke when you express something that you mean. And if that's the standard of jokes now, I don't understand the point. I mean, I understand the rhetorical point of saying what you mean and pretending you don't mean it. Still, the last to understand. Plenty of people haven't yet heard the joke, so I'm not going to be necessarily the last. I'm clicking slightly disagree. I find it easy to work out what someone is thinking or feeling just by looking at their face. I do think I can intuit emotions a bit. I just don't follow through on the intuition, maybe because I give them the chance to express it directly. But I definitely can miss some of the stuff it's hinting at here, so I'm at least clicking slightly disagree. Slightly disagree with the one on the right. Yeah, okay. If there's an interruption, I can switch back to what I was doing very quickly. No, I can feel quite disrupted. I'm really in an executive dysfunction pit at the moment. I know I judge myself harshly and I've made so much creative work, but still, my standards and my needs, not good enough. Full disagree. I'm good at social chit-chat. That feels identical. Well, I enjoy. There's enjoy and good at. And maybe that distinguishes me from like the AFAB autists who are good at social chit chat and don't enjoy it. Oh, the masking that I never learned. I am not good at social chit chat. Well, if you're femme, you mask. People often tell me that I keep going on and on about the same thing. No is the answer, but I don't think people are that rude to me. I'm reasonably self-aware. I know what fascinates me. I know what I will enthuse on and pick apart. Okay, full disagree. I can't remember being told that. Kinda because I already know. When I was young, I used to enjoy playing games involving pretending with other children. I've some memory of that. It definitely wasn't initiated by me, and I didn't really understand how I was participating, so I'm clicking a full disagree. I like to collect information about categories of things, like types of cards, birds, trains, and plants. Gotta catch 'em all. I think so, yeah. Categorical thinking, full agree. I find it difficult to imagine what it would be like to be someone else. Yeah, I'm trying to fathom it. That's kind of inherent to being. I do yearn to not be me, but that wouldn't be via being someone else. I do find it difficult to imagine. You can just leave the sentence there. You had me at difficult to imagine. I like to carefully plan any activities I participate in, so here comes the spontaneous thing again, kind of invertedly, and I end up so plantaneous. I do need that foreplanning and the kind of escape clause, but kind of slight agree. I mean, I like to carefully plan lounging around and having no plan. I enjoy social occasions. Is the general definition of a social occasion something with more than two people? Because two people there is social, and I do enjoy those occasions. What is a social occasion? Here comes an AI answer. People gather. I do think they're referring to more than two people generally. I like board games, I like video games, and I like some people, but when they combine, it becomes a bit much. Slight disagree. I find it difficult to work out people's intentions. Fully agree. Do people have intentions? New situations make me anxious. Fully agree. I enjoy meeting new people. It's a slight disagree. I'm a good diplomat. Define diplomat. An official representing a country abroad, or a person who can deal with others in a sensitive and tactful way. Why would you be tactful? I think I'm far more likely to be honest, which doesn't make me good at representing my country abroad. I'm not very good at remembering people's date of birth. All these artificially inverted double negatives. Just have every question the right way around and figure out the maths afterwards. Because I am pretty good about that. I don't like birthdays, but I seem to retain that kind of information. I find it very easy to play games with children that involve pretending. No. I don't have like a child side manner. I do work serving the public, including children, and I notice my colleagues can turn on communicating with children mode, and I don't have one of those, and kind of because I remember childhood, and one of the things I loved about it, one of the many things I loved about it, was being treated like a child. So maybe that's my political reason for not doing that, but it's not that I could if I wanted to. Yeah, I said I was digging into how this test works. I know I've just answered it honestly, but it's content, isn't it? You've watched it, please. Like, 40 out of 50 significant autistic traits, and I can chat online with a therapist if I want. I mean, that's just 50 questions, and it's boiled it down to whether I clicked slightly agree, or so the slightlys probably didn't matter. Yeah, I checked the source code of this website. Look how detail-oriented I am, and I found that the slight and the definitely actually just give the same value each. And this was in the original Baron Cohen design of the test. You can find that out if you research as deeply as Wikipedia. Yeah, it's on there. As are the factors it allegedly covers. You might be better off reading the original document or maybe more up-to-date research. I'd say I'm uninterested in social skills, maybe okay at communication skills, just people don't bother understanding me. Imagination isn't really how my creativity works. Attention to detail is, and attention switching. 40 of them were the autistic ones, and I kind of knew each time when they were, and I knew that some of them aren't, and not everything perfectly describes every individual. And I do think that there's ways I've changed that make me less autistic if it were just a single axis that you go up or down. Yeah, from my position, I strongly respect the recognition of autism, and I think it's the closest thing to a relevant identity for me. I don't resonate with gender or nationality or race, but in nearly every aspect, just describing me as autistic quickly gets to the point. So I fully believe that should be recognized. And I also don't want it being pathologized, or at least if it is pathologized, then maybe being allistic should also be pathologized. Allistic? Maybe being allistic should also be pathologized. It's allistic, apparently. Kind of doesn't matter. They're barely real people. Some people have this weird psychological condition where they're not autistic, and they perform these odd routines and respond weirdly and don't say what they mean. Aspects that I consider autistic that were not in this test, just off the top of my dome. I'm not going to be exhaustive in this. Voracious veracity, a real thorough allegiance to truth. Because of how awful misleading feels. You've used communication time on the opposite of communication, misinformation. Misleading by mistake because you had wrong information is no better in result than misleading intentionally. Okay, I'm scoring myself a full score of that one. And interest in etymology and puns and deconstruction, that describes me. Does that describe autism? Yes, because autism is based on how similar to me you are. Autism, that means the self. And I'm the self. An allegedly odd accent because it's not necessarily dictated by one's location. I mean, at least somewhat is, but disliking tradition such as, birthdays, religion, marriage, heterosexuality, gender, haircuts. We shouldn't diagnose being free from tradition as being an aberration because clearly you can only really say it from the traditional perspective. Really, as horrid as being imposed these traditions can be, it's still being free from the traditions. I don't need to list every trait. I'm going to go out on gastrointestinal illness. Yeah, that's apparently a thing that correlates. Maybe because of how constantly anxious we are when we're constantly in situations we're not comfortable in. I don't know, but I can barely digest anything lately. I'm really unwell. Not being able to learn how to reply to some quite standard verbal cues, like phatic expressions. I'm nocturnal and I dislike that thing that humans do where they refer to today based on whether or when they slept. That's just a system that can't be consistently codified. Clearly, you need to base it on what we agree the current day in the time zone we're in is. And when people type without using a use-mention distinction, I know it's just a different level of linguistic competence, and arguably, even if I'm trying to state the claim of a higher linguistic competence, my failure to understand linguistic competence of lower levels makes me a bit less competent. But I think there's something in there about linguistic processing, right? Taking things literally. Oh, and liking Sonic the Hedgehog. If you liked this video, you're autistic. I'm giving you my diagnosis token. Pay it forward, but handle it with care.